Good morning. Partners at the Thorn Tax Law Group are experts in tax law, and they're here today to offer advice about the Swiss Bank's program to encourage IRS voluntary disclosures. Well, Kevin E. Thorn, a managing partner at Thorn Tax Law Group, is here with more details. Good morning and welcome back, Kevin.
Hey, how are you, Angela?
I'm doing great. Now, tell us about these programs. What is that all about?
Well, the IRS has put forward a program specifically for banks, not individuals. It's an IRS voluntary disclosure program that gives banks the opportunity to come forward, give over taxpayer information, unfortunately for U.S. taxpayers, and pay a penalty. And in exchange, they get to continue doing business in the U.S. In other words, running their financial information through New York and so on.
Okay, now tell us exactly, what does this mean for U.S. citizens who have offshore accounts?
Well, unfortunately, it's not good news for U.S. citizens, okay, or someone that actually has to file a tax return in the U.S. What it means is these banks, and they could be in Switzerland as well as other countries, they're going to hand over information, and we don't know exactly what that information is. It could be just a number of an account. It could be some other information that we're just not aware of. Whatever deal they strike with the U.S. government and the IRS will result in information of some sort being handed over.
So if you've got an account, an offshore account, the Swiss banks could conceivably throw you under the bus.
Yes, they could, unfortunately for U.S. taxpayers. And we're talking about U.S. citizens, resident aliens. Anyone that's here in the U.S. that files a U.S. tax return could be dragged into this situation if they haven't disclosed the account on their tax return or filed a foreign bank account reporting form. In addition, these banks, in some situations, they're giving waivers where the account holders could actually disclose information and not know that they're going to be giving this information to the U.S. government.
Why is this happening now and it hasn't happened in the past? What's different?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with what's been going on the last 5 or 6 years, where they've been negotiating with individuals in the U.S. taxpayers that haven't been paying their taxes. As you know, we have this huge tax gap in place, and the U.S. government has an interest in getting more people back into the fold to get what they call into compliance, to help pay for some of the debt that we have, obviously. The banks are being forced to bring a lot of this forward because of the laws that are being put in place by the U.S. government. They're passing laws, actively passing laws that will disclose information about U.S. people or individuals or citizens with undisclosed offshore bank accounts.
So these Swiss banks, they have to do it. It's not
they really don't have a choice. And the U.S. is using its pressure around the world to force this. Okay. It's not happening voluntarily.
So
no.
To be proactive, you know, maybe people didn't mean to not check the box, or they figured, you know, who's gonna, it's not a big deal. Okay, so now you know it is a big deal, and
right.
There are consequences. What to do?
Well, most people are doing this by accident. It's not intentional. It's their tax return preparer, and it's a good time of year if you're on an extension to make sure your tax return preparer has checked that box, yes, that you have a foreign account. What people can do is they can contact someone like myself, a tax litigation expert that represents people before the Internal Revenue Service or the Department of Justice, to find exactly out what type of options there are out available for them.
Okay,
yes.
There are a lot of tax attorneys. There are a lot of quote-unquote tax experts. What kinds of things, I mean, I don't imagine that we all know who to look for,
right.
Or what's the sign of a good tax attorney. How do we know that we're with the right person?
Well, I think you have to look for someone that's been doing it for a long time, especially with experience in these IRS voluntary disclosure programs, someone like myself. It's also important to have someone that used to work for the IRS. Myself and a lot of my attorneys are former IRS attorneys that know how the government thinks, how to get the best deal for them. I think it's important to also ask questions like, what is your experience? How long have you been doing this? Do you currently represent people in the IRS offshore voluntary disclosure program?
Mm-hmm. Good questions to ask.
Yeah, I think so.
And for those who, all right, again, we don't know if it's they're intentionally not checking the box or filing these reports. Once you've figured out, all right, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't, some people might be playing Russian roulette and say, well, they haven't caught up with me yet. I might not get caught. What are the consequences if you do?
Well, it's a dangerous game, especially Russian roulette. Basically, you're looking at 50% of the account balance in financial penalties, and that's quite substantial. You're also looking at a criminal investigation, which is pretty scary. And if anyone's ever been audited by the IRS or just received a letter, that's pretty intimidating. But just try kind of multiply that by 100, and now you're looking at what they'll be exposed to just by, instead of contacting a professional that has experience in this area.
That right there is incentive.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you so much for joining us again
Thank
on Let's
you.
Talk Live. Always a pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
And we'll be back with more Let's Talk Live right after this.